The air inside Bella Vita was thick with the scent of fresh basil, roasted garlic, and slow-simmered tomato sauce. The low hum of conversation mixed with the rhythmic clinking of wine glasses and silverware against fine china. It was a bustling Friday night, the kind of evening that promised generous tips but tested every server's patience. Jason Reynolds had been waiting tables at Bella Vita for the past 6 months. He was good at his job, quick with orders, smooth with customers, and sharp enough to upsell expensive wine to indecisive diners. But tonight, he was on edge. The kitchen was backed up, a couple of tables had stiffed him on tips, and a particularly demanding group at table 6 had sent back their entrees twice. His patience was already worn thin when a lone customer walked in, unannounced and unnoticed. The man took a seat at the corner table, away from the lively crowd. He wasn't dressed like the usual clientele. No designer suits, no flashy watches, just a simple, well-fitted jacket, dark jeans, and polished shoes. Jason barely glanced at him before approaching, his irritation creeping into his voice. "Welcome to Bella Vita," he said, his tone clipped. "What can I get you?" The man, Mark DeLuca, lifted his gaze from the menu, studying Jason with unreadable eyes. "I'll need a minute, please." Jason forced a tight smile. "Of course, just don't take all night. We're kind of busy here." Mark raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He simply returned his attention to the menu as Jason walked away, shaking his head. Jason leaned against the bar, rubbing his temple. The bartender, Lucas, slid a glass of water toward him with a knowing smirk. "Tough night?" Lucas asked. Jason scoffed. "Understatement of the year." His eyes flickered back to the man at the corner table. Something about him unsettled Jason, but he chalked it up to his bad mood. He grabbed his notepad and returned to the table, exhaling sharply. "Decided yet, or should I come back in another hour?" Mark, unbothered, closed the menu and looked up. "I'll have the filet mignon, medium rare, and a glass of red." Jason scribbled down the order, muttering, "Finally," under his breath. As he turned, Lucas appeared at his side and hissed in his ear. "Dude, do you know who that is?" Jason frowned. "Some guy with too much time on his hands?" Lucas paled. "That's Mark DeLuca." Jason felt the blood drain from his face. He didn't need the explanation. Everyone in the restaurant business knew the name. Mark DeLuca wasn't just another customer. He was the owner of Bella Vita. Jason turned slowly, heart hammering in his chest. Mark was watching him, amusement flickering behind his composed expression. Jason swallowed hard and quickly returned to the table. His demeanor entirely changed. "Mr. DeLuca, I didn't recognize you. Let me personally make sure your meal is perfect." Mark took a slow sip of his water. "No need, Jason. I'm sure you'll treat me just like any other customer, right?" Jason nodded frantically. "Of course, sir." The rest of the evening dragged on in a haze of anxiety. Every step Jason took, every dish he delivered, felt like walking on eggshells. When Mark's filet mignon was ready, Jason ensured it was cooked to perfection before serving it himself. But the damage was already done. Later that night, as the restaurant emptied out, Jason felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Mark standing beside him. "Come with me," Mark said simply. Jason followed him to the back office, nerves twisting in his gut. Mark sat behind the desk, flipping through a ledger. He gestured for Jason to sit. "You've been working here for a while," Mark said, his voice even. "I don't micromanage, but I do expect my customers to be treated with respect." Jason nodded, his mouth dry. "Yes, sir, I understand. I was just having a bad night." Mark closed the ledger and leaned forward. "We all have bad nights, but the way you treat people reflects the kind of person you are." Silence stretched between them. Then Mark smirked. "Consider this your first and only warning." Jason exhaled in relief. He had dodged a bullet, but he knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't get a second chance. Jason left the office, his mind still spinning. As he walked through the empty restaurant, Lucas clapped him on the back. "Still got your job, huh?" Lucas chuckled. Jason gave a weak nod. "Yeah, but I don't think I'll ever be able to relax again." Lucas smirked. "Well, that's the price of working under a legend." Jason forced a chuckle, but something nagged at him. As he glanced toward the front door, he caught a glimpse of Mark speaking with a man in a suit. Their conversation was hushed, their expressions tense. Jason frowned. Something about the way Mark was speaking, the way his jaw tightened, set off an uneasy feeling in his gut. He had thought the night's lesson was over, but something told him this was only the beginning. As Mark turned to leave, he caught Jason's eye and gave him a knowing look. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was something else. Something that made Jason realize this night wasn't over yet. Jason stood frozen near the entrance, watching as Mark DeLuca exited the restaurant, his conversation with the suited man lingering in Jason's mind like an unresolved chord. Something about it felt off. The tension, the hushed words. Mark wasn't just discussing business. It felt more urgent, more personal. Lucas nudged him. "Dude, you okay?" Jason blinked, snapping back to reality. Yeah, just thinking." Lucas smirked. "Thinking about how you almost got yourself fired?" Jason forced a laugh, but his mind was elsewhere. As the last of the staff finished cleaning up, he stepped outside for some air. The night was cool, the streets empty. That's when he saw Mark again, just a few feet away, leaning against a sleek black car. The suited man was gone, but Mark was on his phone, his expression tense. Jason hesitated, then turned to walk the other way. He had already pushed his luck tonight, but just as he stepped off the curb, he heard something that made him stop cold. "I told you, I don't want any more blood on my hands." Jason's stomach twisted. He turned slightly, just enough to see Mark's silhouette under the streetlight. His grip on the phone was tight, his jaw clenched. Whatever this was about, it wasn't restaurant business. Jason took a step back, his foot scraping against loose gravel. Mark's head snapped up. Their eyes met. For a moment, the world stood still. Then Mark ended the call, slipping his phone into his pocket. He stared at Jason for a long second before walking toward him, his expression unreadable. Jason's pulse pounded. Was this it? Had he just overheard something he shouldn't have? Mark stopped a few feet away. His voice was calm but firm. "You should go home, Jason." Jason swallowed hard. "Yeah, long night." Mark nodded once, then stepped back. "Get some rest. Tomorrow might be interesting." Jason didn't ask what he meant. He just turned and walked away, his heart still hammering in his chest. He had a bad feeling, and deep down he knew this was far from over. Jason barely slept that night. His mind kept replaying Mark's words. "I don't want any more blood on my hands." What did that mean? Was Mark involved in something criminal? He tried to shake the thought, but it clung to him like a shadow. The next day, Jason arrived at the restaurant earlier than usual. He needed to see Mark to figure out what was really going on. As he stepped inside, he noticed an unfamiliar man at the bar. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark suit. He wasn't drinking, just sitting there watching. Mark emerged from the back, his eyes landing on Jason immediately. "In my office, now." Jason followed, heart pounding. As soon as the door shut behind them, Mark leaned against his desk, arms crossed. "You heard something last night?" Jason hesitated. "Yeah." Mark exhaled sharply. "Jason, there are things about this place you don't understand, and I'd rather keep it that way." Jason's pulse quickened. "Is this about the restaurant or something else?" Mark's jaw tightened. "You don't want to know." Before Jason could press further, a loud crash came from the front of the restaurant. Mark's head snapped toward the door. Without a word, he rushed out, Jason right behind him. The man in the suit had knocked over a chair. He stood now, glaring at Mark. "We need to talk." Mark's face darkened. "Not here." The man sneered. "No more hiding, DeLuca. You know what's coming." Jason watched as Mark's fingers twitched slightly, like he was resisting the urge to reach for something. A weapon? His stomach dropped. Mark took a step forward. "Get out!" The man smirked but didn't argue. He straightened his jacket and walked toward the exit. As he passed Jason, he paused, giving him a long, unreadable look. Then he was gone. Jason turned to Mark. "What the hell was that?" Mark ran a hand through his hair. "Trouble." Jason exhaled shakily. "You said yesterday that I should get some rest because today would be interesting." "This is beyond interesting, Mark." Mark met his gaze, his expression grim. Go home, Jason. Jason shook his head. Number? Not until you tell me what's really going on. Mark sighed, glancing around as if debating whether to let Jason in on the truth. Finally, he muttered, Meet me at the docks tonight. Midnight. Jason's breath caught. Why the docks? Mark's eyes darkened. Because that's where you'll get your answers. Jason's nerves were on edge as he made his way to the docks. The place was quiet, the water reflecting the dim glow of streetlights. He spotted Mark standing near a shipping container, hands in his pockets. You actually showed up, Mark said. Jason nodded. I need to know the truth. Mark took a deep breath. This restaurant isn't just a restaurant, it's a front. Jason's stomach clenched. A front for what? Before Mark could answer, a pair of headlights cut through the darkness. A black SUV rolled to a stop a few feet away. Jason turned as the door opened, and the suited man from earlier stepped out, flanked by two others. Mark tensed. Damn it, the man smirked. Told you, DeLuca, no more running. Jason's blood ran cold. He had walked into something far bigger than he had imagined. Mark turned to Jason. Get out of here. Jason shook his head. Not a chance. The man in the suit chuckled. Brave kid. Too bad he doesn't know what he's gotten himself into. Mark clenched his fists. Leave him out of this. The man's smirk widened. Afraid I can't do that. The tension was thick, the air electric with danger. Jason knew in that moment that whatever was about to happen, there was no turning back. Jason's pulse pounded as he stood between Mark and the suited men, the weight of the moment pressing down on him like a heavy storm. The leader of the group, a man with slicked back hair and a cold smirk, stepped forward. You were warned, DeLuca, he said, but it seems you like to test limits. Mark exhaled sharply. I told you, I'm out. I want no part of this anymore. The man chuckled, shaking his head. That's not how this works. You know that. His eyes flicked to Jason. And this one? He knows too much already. Jason's mouth went dry, but he forced himself to hold his ground. If you think I'm just going to stand here and let you do whatever it is you're planning, you're dead wrong. The suited man sighed dramatically, then pulled something from his jacket, a sleek black pistol. Then I guess we have a problem. Mark shifted slightly, subtly stepping in front of Jason. We don't have to do this. The man smirked. Yes, we do. He raised the gun. But before he could pull the trigger, the air erupted with a sharp crack. Gunfire. The bullet whizzed past Jason's ear, shattering the ground beside him. Instinct took over. Mark lunged forward, grabbing Jason by the arm and yanking him behind a stack of crates. The men scattered, taking cover as more gunfire rang out from the shadows. Jason's breathing was ragged. What the hell is happening? Mark peeked over the crates. I think we just got unexpected backup. More shots, then silence. The suited man groaned, gripping his arm where a bullet had grazed him. His men helped him back toward the SUV, and he cast a venomous glare at Mark. This isn't over. Then they sped off into the night. As the dust settled, a shadowy figure stepped into view. Jason squinted, trying to make out the person who had just saved them. A woman, tall, dressed in all black, a gun still in her hands. You're lucky I was watching, she said coolly, lowering her weapon. Mark cursed under his breath. I told you to stay out of this, she smirked. And let you get killed? No chance. Jason looked between them. You know her? Mark sighed. Jason, meet Evelyn. She's an old friend. Evelyn rolled her eyes. More like the only person keeping Mark from getting himself buried. She turned to Jason. And you must be the new recruit. Recruit? Jason blinked. I'm just a waiter. Evelyn smirked. Not anymore, kid. Back at the restaurant, Jason sat across from Mark in the dimly lit office, his mind still reeling from the night's events. So you're telling me, Jason began, rubbing his temples, that this place isn't just a restaurant. It's part of some underground network. Mark nodded. It started as a way to keep certain people safe, but over time, things got complicated. Jason exhaled. And now those guys want you dead? They want control, Mark leaned forward. And they think I'm standing in their way. Jason shook his head. This is insane. Yesterday, I was just worried about getting fired. Mark chuckled. Welcome to the real world. Jason met his gaze. So, what happens now? Mark smirked. That depends on you. You can walk away, pretend none of this ever happened. Jason hesitated. He could walk away. Go back to a normal life. Pretend this night was just a bad dream. But something in him knew the truth. He was already in too deep. Jason stood, his resolve hardening. I'm in. Mark grinned. Knew you'd say that. Evelyn crossed her arms. Then we better get to work. There's a lot you need to learn. As Jason looked around the restaurant, his restaurant now in a way, he felt something he hadn't before. Purpose. He had no idea what came next, but he was ready. If Jason's descent into the underground world of Bella Vita kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Drop a comment with your theories. What twists do you think are coming next in this dangerous game? Stay tuned, because this is just the beginning.